Good evening, everybody. Great to have you with us tonight. And we have three really interesting artists who've come at their works from completely different aesthetical perspectives. We've got Michael Zavros here in the middle, who, created that intensely hyper-realist, glamorous, but also melancholy bad dad painting. We've got Guy Morgan on the end there, who made a very distorted, almost Bacon-esque portrayal of his experience of a disastrous retinal detachment with his eye. And we have Mitch Cairns here, whose self-portrait is a very abstract work, but amazingly reflects a real likeness to him, as you can see him before you right now. What I really want to get to the bottom of in the next half an hour is the fact that these guys could have chosen any single aspect of their life story, their physicality, or their character to represent in these portraits, but they chose the portraits that they chose. So we'll get to the bottom of that as we move along. But let's start with how you guys approach your work. And Guy, you went about your painting in a very unusual way, even for yourself. Tell us about how exactly you painted your self-portrait.
Well, it came about through a rather unfortunate incident where I nearly went blind in one eye, and being a visual person, you really depend an awful lot on your eyes, and basically what it's left me with is very distorted vision in my left eye, which unfortunately is permanent.
So how do we look right now to you?
Scary. No, everybody has a dominant eye, left eye, right eye, and if you have a damaged eye, your dominant eye becomes more dominant, so you see normally. But if you close your dominant eye, your good eye, then everything becomes very distorted. There's no straight lines and no round circles. So the reason I chose to go this route was to try and show people what I actually see, because it's very difficult to do anything else to try and demonstrate it. So to actually produce an image of myself, how I saw myself with my bad eye, was why I chose to do me.
So how exactly did you go about doing that?
Sit in front of a mirror, or take a photograph of yourself on your computer, and I did both, and try and view with my distorted eye, and draw with my good eye. So basically look with the good eye, and then if you look with your good eye and draw with if you look with your bad eye and draw with your bad eye, you're going to get a distortion of a distortion. So I have to try and remember the bad vision and then draw with my good eye so I see what I'm doing. So there's a disconnect because you're seeing two different things with your eyes.
You wrote about what you called a psychological disconnect between what you're seeing with your bad eye and then the way that your good eye wanted to portray it. Why was that a psychological barrier? I mean, what do you mean?
Because you try and neaten things up, make it look nice, but in fact, what I actually see is not nice. And my view of aestheticism is that I want people to have stuff on the wall that looks nice. And with my bad eye, it's not nice because it's not normal.
Okay, let's move on to your painting, Mitch. You actually started by trying to paint a portrait of someone else, and you had 2 failed attempts at that. Talk us through that moment as you were painting that person and you were realising it wasn't working out.
Just like every other painting that doesn't work out, it just looks back at you and it is either terribly boring or it is just something that you couldn't be bothered looking at twice. And I made 2 of them, so I decided to shelve that.
What did you say to that person after the first failed attempt?
I said, just sit tight, we'll do it again sometime.
And how long in between those 2 sittings?
Say again?
So you had that first moment and then you decided it wasn't working. And when did you invite them back? Was it like the next day, or did you give it a few months? Or
No. I had the one sitting, and I made drawings from that sitting. I made one, and they had left within the week. I'd started one painting, it was awful. I started it again, and they actually looked incredibly different. So that they weren't. I wasn't sort of trying for a repeat sort of hit. It was like I'd redrawn it completely, and so I kind of figured that I'd tried it from two very sort of different angles, and both of them didn't quite work. So I just put it aside. Figured that painting a self-portrait was fair enough. Wrote them an email and saying, I'm not going to make this painting for a little while.
Do you think you'll make it again?
Yeah. But I contacted them wanting to make it regardless of a portrait prize, because I'm not a portrait painter as such, and I don't have a track record of entering portrait prizes, so it wasn't as if it was an incredibly sort of, smart thing to do out of the ordinary. So it was like I'll intend on doing it another time.
Was it pretty awkward writing that email?
No. I was pretty relaxed.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Let's talk about the way your work came about, Michael. It's called Bad Dad, and I know that you make a lot of your work through painting from photographs. Who took this photograph of you, and how did this composition of that picture come about?
My wife Alison took the photo. Just took hundreds of photos, and it's kind of stressful for her because I'm the artist that's not pressing the button, and I'm yelling and screaming and getting angry.
Wow.
But it's actually not a work that I made for the Archibald initially. It was about 18 months ago. It was a little bit sooner than that. I started taking photographs for this work that I wanted to make, and it just happened to be something that I got home from travel and decided I wanted to quickly finish and enter in the prize.
Okay, and I mean, how did you decide on that setup and the toys that you say represent your children and being in the pool and that pose that you have as you look so deeply and with a sense of melancholy into that water at your own reflection?
For a long time I'd wanted to make a contemporary Narcissus image. I'm really drawn to classical depictions of Narcissus and this very fascinating cautionary tale that I think really speaks to the times that we live in. And I just had this idea to cast this demigod in a contemporary pool setting. And then when I got into making the work, the idea of it being a bad dad and that the element that this character would spurn would not be his lover for himself. It would be his domestic duties. It would be his paternal duties. And so I started mucking around with pool toys, and I'm a big Jeff Koons fan, and we had this inflatable rabbit that was given to one of the kids for a present, and I just suddenly thought this is perfect. This is going to be the centerpiece of this work.
Well, let's get into why you chose to depict yourself in that way. You look very glamorous. You look very beautiful. The colours are intense, but it does have that element of melancholy that ties into the idea that you're talking about, that maybe you are neglecting something in your life. Mm-hmm. How closely does that reflect to your experience? Like, you have 3 children and a wife. You're also very ambitious with your art. Is there a part of you that feels like you do neglect some of your responsibilities? Yeah,
for sure. And working long hours and being very self-focused, I think that the career of a contemporary artist is kind of narcissistic, and you're encouraged to be narcissistic, to think about yourself and what you're making and how you compare with other artists. I think artists never stop doing that. But as a dad, I don't think you get to totally be a narcissist. And I don't think that I'm a narcissist, but you don't get away with that even if you were. You don't get to think about yourself all the time, but yeah, I was definitely kind to myself when I was portraying this
you
figure.
Look pretty good.
Well, I tidied up the back hair and ear hair and that sort of thing. I think just looking at classical depictions of Narcissus, I think you have to feel for him what he feels for himself. Otherwise, you sort of don't go along with with the ride. You know, he's fallen in love with his own reflection, and you sort of have to have to get what Narcissus is into.
And is that why a sense of glamour kind of pervades the look of the whole painting?
Yeah, I certainly went for a very highly aestheticized work, and I looked back to really art historical kind of composition and played with this, you know, even placing pool toys in leading line kind of ways and turning up the volume so that you get this highly saturated image, but that it's so strangely still. So there's a kind of a quietude, a melancholy that's fallen on these pool toys that are no longer that are just floating on the surface of it. I was interested in something sinister, something had taken place.
Is any of that based on reality? Like, has something particularly bad happened? Have you let your kids down a certain way?
I mean, other times I've made self-portraiture or other kind of portraiture. It's, for whatever reason, I sort of reach for the worst case scenario. It's what's the worst thing that I can think of? What's the worst thing? What's the worst part of myself that I can portray? And the worst, the thing I fear most. What can I lay on the canvas to expose the most, the thing I fear most?
Yeah. Well, speaking of the thing that you fear most, the painting that won you the Morgan Prize was a picture of your daughter playing dead.
Mm-hmm.
And that also had a really melancholic tone about it. Is that's tapping into that same feeling of facing your fears through your artistic representations?
Yeah, exactly. It was, at the time, I couldn't sleep. I was worrying about the kids, and I would get up and check on them. And totally
irrationally, or was there something going on?
It was a bit irrational. There's that irrational thing that happens when you're not awake and you're not asleep, and you just I find that time of the day to be most irrational. And I would lay awake, and these thoughts would prevail, and the work emerged out of that, like facing the worst thing that I could think of, but also in a very playful and highly aesthetic way. I mean, I want the work to be seductive and to almost feel like advertising, something incredibly beautiful to look at.
Yeah, it was an amazing piece of work, and the $150,000 Morgan Prize attests to that. Guy, you chose to represent basically the story of your retina detaching, which is pretty intense. You could have chosen anything. You've had a very interesting life. You went to art school in London. You've lived here in Australia. You spent a lot of time living in Sydney, worked in advertising. Why did you choose this particular part of your life story to represent in your first Archibald portrait entry?
That's a really... it was just a natural thing to do. Like, if you're an artist and if you're interested in exploring aesthetics, creating, doing stuff, you have an empty piece of paper and you want to put something on there, and then there's a kind of play between the logic and the aesthetic and the, hey, I just want to be creative. And I had no choice but to do this. This was something that I had to do. I'm not a portrait painter, although I may become one. Other subjects will be interesting, but to start with myself and to try and just play with a disadvantage. Like, I wouldn't recommend retinal detachment to anybody. But if you're going to do it, work with what you've got.
Yeah, well, speaking of what it's like to have your retina detaching, the background of your painting, you painted with a technique that's something you do in a lot of your works, which is using an eyedropper, and you've basically depicted the colours of what it looked like to experience a retina detaching.
It's really interesting. I took a couple of sketches. I didn't tell you this before, but I took a couple of... As I was going through this, some really poor sketches, but there are very good memory triggers as to what you actually go through when it's actually happening. And there were good triggers to say, okay, well, that's the person that I see, and what are you going to put, like in any portrait painting, it's the background that has a really interesting element to the painting, whether it's Rembrandt or Van Gogh or so many others that have done self-portraits. And I just felt that I'd done a couple of earlier studies and earlier paintings which had been flat background, and I thought this was a good way of introducing the kind of things that happen when you go through this retinal detachment. So you get a kind of little patch of grey, if you like, a little shadow. Some people, surgeons call it a curtain, and that's generally speaking grey, but it doesn't stop you seeing. And then as it gets worse, various things happen, and you actually end up getting flashes, which is the nerves separating. So there's a lot of different colours in the background, which kind of are just a small part of the process.
Mitch, let's get to your painting and why you chose to represent yourself in that way. And I guess with your work, it's a lot harder to tell where you were going with the representation. But as I said before, it does represent a real likeness to you, despite how abstract the work is. Which part of your personality do you think this painting hones in on?
What did I say the other night?
Your indecisiveness?
Indecisiveness. Look, when drawing or setting out to make this painting, I sort of had produced, a whole bunch of drawings. I went through a pad, or I got to the end of the pad. I sort of started to redraw over the top of them, so the eyes are sort of set up halfway up the head, because one was a bad drawing and the other one was a slightly better drawing. And I sort of went in with that. That's the sort of level of sort of indecisiveness in terms of that, I suppose. But I'm not sure what aspect of my personality it captures, to be truthful.
Yeah, I mean, what do you think? What do you see as the artist of this work and the subject that makes it reflect, some likeness to you?
I've got no choice in it. I mean, I kind of had to look and put and to achieve the likeness is basically the number one thing. I purged the painting of any sort of trimming. I kept it really simple. You were talking about backgrounds. I just put down a monochrome, a small decorative element to maybe sort of pull the eye back into the line work of the head. But I mean, it's really super simple. I really just wanted to go likeness. Produce the work relatively quickly, and just keep it, just dress it right down, and no bones, just bare bones rather. I mean, a lot of my work is like that. I generally try to keep it as simple as I can, basically one idea rolling at a time. And I had to do the same thing for the painting. Actually, that's the reason why most of the other two worked, because I was thinking too hard.
Why do you think that was? Why do you think you were able to knock this out quicker? Was it the pressure of having someone else there with you in the space?
I think so. I think it was probably quite a good idea to actually stuff up a couple of times and actually have someone there to sort of hit the speed bump. Sort of hit the speed bump with them, and then sort of. But there's also the other thing of doing the self-portrait, and I mentioned this the other night too, is that you're the driver and the passenger, and the passenger's really annoying, and you kind of, you sort of have this thing where if it was somebody else, they may be too timid, or they may not necessarily sort of let you know about the inconsistencies in the painting of them, or the way you've portrayed them, or whereas if you're doing it yourself, you know exactly. You just know exactly. And that line that sort of goes through the head kind of had to be done, basically, like driving on the road, just kind of, just how it had to be done in one hit. It was like, super simple.
So the noise in your head of that annoying passenger got pretty loud as you were painting yourself?
Yeah, because I started, there was a few moments there where I was chickening out. I was like, oh, refer back, no, go, just keep doing it. You made just enough paintings to know how to make a painting, so just keep going.
Yeah, right. That's really interesting. Did you know you had something special when you finished that painting?
Yeah, definitely.
How?
It took about did take a short amount of time to do, and it was it was the sort of satisfaction that you have when you feel you've made a good painting, and it's different with a portrait because it's a different level of satisfaction because if you got the likeness, or if there is something which is bang on, sort of, using those sort of observational sets that we sort of have, it was something a little bit more sort of satisfying in that, as opposed to a lot of my other work is relatively sort of graphic in the way it's read and made, with a certain level of design in doing it, so you can redo, and you can sort of fudge some parts in a sense, or it's all just about suggestion, whereas this one was very much sort of had to nail something, and that something was rather specific.
Guy, this was the first time you painted a portrait in the Archibald, and it was a very unique topic. How has becoming a finalist changed your view of portraiture?
Well, first of all, it's an absolute hoot.
Yeah?
If you're going to go into a show and get hung, there isn't a better one in Australia. Sorry, I've taken a step back. I was just enjoying the trip there on being an Archibald finalist.
Just take a moment if you want to. Just relax, take it in. Here you are.
Yeah, it's great. It's really fun, guys. I recommend this for everybody. Can you please repeat the question?
Well, you've told me before that you'd never done portrait before, but what happened to you with your retina made you really want to tell that story through portrait. But now you're looking at painting lots more portraits, and basically, what was a horrendous experience for you has turned into something quite positive to some extent.
Definitely. I'm looking at where do I take this, and the obvious next step in terms of the analysis of what you might do or what I might do is to work out who I'm going to paint. And it's not going to be me again. I've done me, been there, done that. It's there. I'm not going to turn out another 40 Rembrandt self-portraits. So I'm looking at where, in fact, this style of having a kind of disconnect might take me in terms of another subject. And the first place I'm going at the moment is somebody maybe with a dark side, and I'm not going to mention any names, but some famous people that maybe have a slight, however, I've also just did a bit of viewing with other artists in terms of who've done these talks, and there were a couple of people just as I was watching the videos, and I closed my eye and looked at the kind of vision I was getting and realised that actually that maybe what's happened to me, interestingly enough, could be a real advantage.
That's a beautiful thing.
I don't know where it's going to take me, but I'm going to enjoy the ride.
Well, clearly being a finalist has had a massive impact for you. For Michael, you've won a number of amazing awards over the years, the Bulgari Prize, you've won the Moran Prize, and you've been in the Archibalds in the finalists 5 times. What do art prizes mean to you, and how have they changed or not changed your artistic journey?
I think prizes are just such a nice endorsement of what it is you do. Often they're a lottery that you take part in. Although with the Bulgari Prize, I just got a call from Wayne Tunnicliffe, head of Australian Art here, and just said, because I was the inaugural winner, he said, we're doing this prize and you're it. And it was one of those lovely, was a very nice recognition of the work that I'd been making, and it sort of come out of left field a little bit. But I think prizes are just incredibly encouraging. You get a lot of media attention when you win a prize. You obviously get some financial support when you win a prize, but it's just a really good endorsement of what it is you're doing and why you're doing it.
But Mitch, do you worry that winning a prize or even not winning a prize could steer an artist in the wrong direction?
I think it totally could, and can and has.
Why do you think it does that? I mean, does it steer them off a more of an
Probably
internal
because they
course?
just take their eye off the ball, really. I mean, the Archibald is specific because if you're not a portrait painter, you're making a very specific prize, and or painting rather, and it says other prizes which basically sort of scoop in and take out a portion of your actual practice, which I think are the most the rewarding ones, the ones which sort of you're trying to try it on, and of course you can you sort of have every right to try it on and maybe make a painting outside of your sort of regular sort of comfort zone. I think artists are entitled to do that, but I don't know. Perhaps success in that it does also sort of come with the fact of actually sort of staying on task, really, and not allowing the sort of successes and greater successes to derail the sort of natural sort of drive. I think it's a scary thought. To allow that to in.
Yeah, well, I hope your success as a finalist doesn't derail your drive in the future. And I thank you guys for joining us, and thank you guys for listening. We've got Mitch Cairns, Michael Zavros, and we have also Guy Morgan. Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you.